The president wants to spy on 200 million Americans without a warrant. Has he read this document, which he was sworn to uphold?
Now, I will not have you libel Abraham Lincoln.
I don't understand the problem with registering guns. We register cars.
Mark Levine brings you the news the government doesn't want you to know.
Today, an explosive story about connections between white supremacists and Islamic terrorists.
When there's a conflict between Scalia's conservative values and the Constitution of the United States, he throws away the Constitution.
We do have secret prisons. That is not what America's all about.
Let's go to Mark in 5, 4, 3, 2.
Good evening, America. Good evening, Fairfax County. Welcome to the Inside Scoop. I am your host, Mark Levine. I began the Inside Scoop more than 15 years ago right here on Channel 10. And I'm proud to see how far it's gone, actually. I'm proud to see how far my successors have taken it. I used to do this show once or twice a week. Now, given my busy schedule as a delegate in the Virginia House of Delegates, I do it maybe once or twice a year. But I'm still very proud of the Inside Scoop. I'm proud of producer Ben Zool and all the many people here, Raphael, who's worked with me for almost 15 years, and all the work they do. They really do try to bring interesting, provocative shows about public policy and politics, and have been doing so for 15 years. So congratulations to the Inside Scoop enterprise. And if I've done more of these shows than anyone else, I dare say that the person sitting to my left, Mike Lane, has been my guest more often than anyone else. Mike Lane is the president of Intelligent Strategies. It is his job to give strategy to help Republicans win in Virginia. And it's my job, I guess, as a Democratic delegate who proudly represents Alexandria, Arlington, and Fairfax, to try to stop him. So we are actually working at cross purposes. And some have asked me, why the heck do you, time and time again, and Mike and I have literally debated hundreds of times. That's not an exaggeration. Hundreds of times on the Inside Scoop, before the Close-Up Foundation and other venues. Why do I bring on air someone with whom I'm literally at cross purposes? The answer actually goes back, in my view, to a very old-fashioned version of America. A version where Democrats and Republicans could agree, could strongly disagree, but would do so agreeably. I like having Mike Lane on. He never gets personal. I think he's dead wrong on a number of issues. He thinks I'm dead wrong on a number of issues. But we always manage to disagree agreeably. And thankful, and I would say, frankly, in America, given where we are today in a very bitter partisan environment, I think this old-fashioned thing is a good thing, and I hope that more Americans who disagree with each other at least will talk to each other. So, Mike, I don't know if you have an introductory beginning, but I just wanted to share that.
Mark, first of all, thank you for having me back. It is like old times, as you suggested when you invited me to be here. I feel very comfortable. It's a very nice welcome. Second thing, I noticed we used the old lead-in tonight for the show, and my hair was so much longer back then than it is now.
We looked a lot younger then.
We did.
We really did. So it's kind of nostalgic to see. And as you notice, you were in my intro more by far than anyone else.
I appreciated it.
So, gloves off, all that nice stuff aside. The big news, of course, last week, Mike, was the president being censured for the first time, I believe, since Andrew Jackson. I think he's only the second president to be censured in American history, literally condemned by a branch of Congress when the House of Representatives condemned the racist tweets of Donald Trump. Those were the tweets that told 4 American members of Congress, women of color, to go back to the countries they came from. All 4 are citizens of the United States. One is a naturalized citizen. She's been in America since she was 8, a refugee from Somalia. The other 3 were born in the United States of America, one of whom, Ayanna Pressley, has had her family here for many, many generations, is a descendant of slaves. I don't know how people cannot see that as racist, but what's your view on that?
Mark, you have to have a racial intent when you're doing this. These 4 women banded together themselves. They marketed themselves as the squad. They don't let anybody else in. White women need not apply to their little group. And when Nancy Pelosi criticized them for getting bad press for the Congress and the Democrats, they accused Nancy Pelosi of being the racist. There's a new poll out, I forget who it is, but it says that 40% of your party thinks that even criticism aimed at anyone of color color is a racist activity. This is crazy. We have to live in a world where we're allowed to criticize people. These women clearly have a very, very different vision of what a good and healthy America is than the rest of us do, particularly in my party. So therefore, they're entitled to criticism. By telling them to go back where they came from, you know, that might be the districts that they came from. It could be anything, but there was zero racial intent that I saw in that at all. They're the ones that banded together, branded themselves as the squad, women of color.
Okay, let me unpack a lot of that. First of all, I didn't hear where they called Nancy Pelosi racist. I think that's an exaggeration.
They did.
They said Nancy Pelosi was racist?
They said she was singling out them because they were women of color.
All right, I will look for that quote. Let me just say at the get-go, I am a proud progressive Democrat. I don't agree with a lot of what these four women say, and it's perfectly fair and just to criticize people based on their views. That's all good. If Donald Trump had said, these four women, I disagree with them on immigration, I disagree with them on racial issues, I think they're wrong, here's why, no one would be complaining about what he said. I myself strongly disagree with AOC and Omar on a bunch of things.
Mark, everybody disagrees with everything that Donald Trump says. Everything.
It's the way he did it. This is a man who has a long history. When he says to people who are American citizens, go back to where you came from, and specifically says they are from other countries. Now, maybe he was ignorant and didn't realize that these four were American citizens. Maybe he doesn't realize that members of Congress have to be American citizens in order to run for Congress. Maybe he just doesn't understand how our Constitution works. But I don't think it's an exaggeration to say that because they were women of color, you know, he has two wives from other countries. Melania, in fact, by all accounts, did not arrive here illegally. Somehow I think that undocumented white people, including his wife, Melania, he's okay with, even if they break our immigration laws. At the same time, he's using this racist trope, saying, go back to where you came from. Why not just say, AOC, you're wrong. I disagree with you.
It's not a racist trope to say go back. That's standard campaign rhetoric. It's used all the time in conversation. It is simply not a racist trope. Maybe you take it that way. Maybe some of your friends take it that way. Maybe the squad, self-designated women of color, take it that way or want to project that they're taking it that way. But the rest of us don't take it that way.
Where's Ayanna Pressley going to go?
Get out of here. Go back where you came from. She can go back to Boston. That's where she needs to go, back to Boston.
I think she's from Cincinnati. But the point is, but the point is that he specifically said these women were from other countries. So he was just
some
mistaken.
of us think Boston is another country.
Look, if this were the first and only time Donald Trump had used racial rhetoric, then maybe you could say it's a one-off. That's not true of this man. And you don't have to defend him, Mike.
No,
it's not
Mark,
in your contract. Let's just quickly go through. We have the whole birther nonsense, saying Barack Obama wasn't born here.
Wasn't racist.
There's him saying that Judge Curiel could not be fair because he was a Mexican judge, Latino judge. He could not deliver justice fairly. Even Paul Ryan called that racist. Was that racist?
I don't remember Paul Ryan's response to that.
Okay, I can show it to you. But saying that Judge Curiel couldn't rule fairly because he was a Latino judge, that's racist.
Well, I think the implication there was that there perhaps was a conflict of interest. Was this judge strong enough and honest enough to deliver a fair and unbiased opinion on the facts of the case?
The facts of the case was Trump University. It had nothing to do with the wall.
No, but I think as we look at the state of American judiciary these days, there are a plethora of judges who do not have the ability to separate their feelings from what the facts in the case are.
Yes, but he didn't say Judge Curiel's too liberal. He's too liberal, I can't trust him. He said he's too Mexican, I can't trust him. And that brings me to another racist trope. When in the very first major speech he gave, he says Mexico is not sending their best, they're sending their rapists, they're sending their drug lords, and some he assumes, I guess because he hasn't met any, some he assumes are nice people, are decent people, good people, but all the ones he knows of are rapists and drug dealers. Is that not racist? Is that not the thing that launched his campaign?
He did not say that all the ones he knows of were rapists and criminals.
Why does some he have to assume are good people?
Standard political hyperbole. Look, we are getting rapists, gang members, criminals, drug dealers, arms dealers. We're getting all those over the Mexican border. And you know what? More than some, most of them
So each of these things, the Central Park joggers, way back. His father he and his father were brought in by the Department of Justice for refusing to rent their apartments to black people. That's 40 years ago. There's the Central Park joggers, the full-page ad in the New York Times of people who happen to be innocent saying, kill them, give them the death penalty. I mean, how many of these does it take? How many would it take? What does it take for you to admit that Donald Trump has a racist problem?
You need to demonstrate to me some racial motivation, which you've not yet done. And if you look at his record minority employment, record minority wages.
Not in his government.
Yes, in his government.
No.
Mark,
black people are doing better across the country, thanks Obama. But they're not in Trump's government. They're not. He doesn't have a single black person in his government. The last one from the reality show, what's her name, left. Omarosa. That was it.
Okay.
There's Ben Sleepy.
Dr. Carson, I think, is his
Ben
name.
Carson, yes.
The most renowned neurosurgeon in the country and probably in the world, who happens to be in his cabinet.
Who happens to know nothing about housing and urban development and has been asked basic questions that he doesn't know about.
I'm appalled to hear that somebody may have been appointed to a political office based on their connections and not on their specific expertise. That just shocks me to hear that, Mark. Come on. Look. Minorities are doing fabulously well in the economy, in jobs, in job growth.
We're going to get to the next segment
in wage growth. It's all fabulous for women and minorities. And
I agree that President Obama brought us back from the Great Recession, and people are doing very well.
Then why do those statistics not exist in Obama's administration?
They did exist in his administration.
No, they didn't.
Absolutely, unemployment went way down.
But not for blacks and Hispanics.
Of course it did.
It was only in the Trump administration that it went way down for blacks and Hispanics.
Of course it did. When you find when unemployment reaches low levels, it takes a while because of systemic racism that white unemployment tends to decline before black and Latino unemployment, again because of systemic racism. But let me suggest a larger point.
It's an accident that minorities do better under Trump.
Let me suggest a larger point. You asked what was his motivation. I'm going to give you his motivation.
Okay.
I actually don't know whether Donald Trump is, quote, racist or not, unquote. I tend to think he probably is. But I think his motivation is political. I think his motivation is the same motivation that George Wallace had in 1968. I think Donald Trump is maybe he began unintentionally, but certainly now he's intentionally using racial animus to make his base, which is racially animus toward black people, to get them to support him. I think that's what it's about.
We disagree.
You can fight with me about that afterwards, but I also think there's a racial element in the immigration debate and in the kids that are being separated from their parents. I don't see many white kids in those cases. We'll get back to that, and I know you want to respond right after these.
Okay, so we drowned the fire, stirred it, drowned it again, and now just feel if it's cold.
Yeah.
Cool.
Smokey just gave me a bear hug.
I know. I already posted it.
I got a creak in my neck, limp in my step, cramping in my muscles every time I try to flex. But if you throw me love, I'll throw you some more.
It's a big responsibility.
Oh, it's huge. I know, it's huge.
And the salary.
Oh my god, yes. I mean,
Right?
like, I was about to move in with my parents, and right before, so this saved me.
I really believe in you, you know?
Thank you. It's nice to hear that from someone.
These are cool. Did you, what did
report back to the Inside Scoop. Here again, your host.
Welcome back to the Inside Scoop. I'm your host, Mark Levine, a proud delegate who represents Alexandria, Arlington, and parts of Fairfax County, just a little part of Fairfax County, actually, in the Virginia House of Delegates. I'm a proud Democrat. My guest is proud Republican Mike Lane, who works to help Republicans get elected. And we're going to talk at the very end of our segment about the prospects in Virginia as we actually work to combat each other. We'll get to that, I promise. But staying on national topics for a minute, I think more offensive, at least in my eyes, than even the racist tweet of the President of the United States, is what we're doing at the border. I don't understand how anyone could support ripping a child away from her or his parents. I know the argument, well, they shouldn't have come here in the first place. We could argue about that. I would argue they're escaping persecution and seeking asylum, and that's what America's all about. But totally apart from that, and we'll get to that, I know you'll want to, Mike, taking a child from her or his parents, an 8-year-old, a 4-year-old, a baby, separating from their parents, putting them in, let's face it, substandard conditions where they often have to sleep on a hard concrete floor, where they have to sleep often at night with the lights on, in overcrowded conditions. We've already lost at least a couple dozen people, children who've died in these cages. Surely that's not American values.
Mark, in this country, any parent who gets arrested and incarcerated goes to jail without their child.
But their kids don't. But their kids don't.
Well,
why are we putting the kids in cages?
Their kids get into a foster system.
We're not putting them in a foster system.
We are taking these kids and putting them into a foster system. In fact, the very first thing they do is try and ascertain whether or not there are any family members, even extended family members, that are in the United States, and they ship them to those locations, to those families.
That's the way we used to do it.
That's the way we still do it.
It's not the way we do it now. I could give you case after case where people are saying, I can't find my aunt, I can't talk to my cousin, I can't talk to... I mean, the Flores decision, which, for those who don't know, what the Flores decision was a consent agreement which said you can't lock up the kids longer than a certain amount.
20 days.
You can lock up the parents,
right,
but not the kids. And we have never seen, and I mean, you may find an example of 1 or 2 or 3 kids, but thousands of children and babies in these substandard conditions. They don't even get a toothbrush. They're allowed to wash once every 3 days.
All right, so you're
18 in a cell meant for 2.
Your hero, Congresswoman AOC, and her buddies in the squad, they went down there. And they held this press conference after they took their tour, and AOC was out there making all the accusations that you were making. No toothbrushes, drinking from toilets, sleeping on hard floors, blah, blah, blah. And
that have all been reported in the press, not just from this one place.
And guess what? Not one of the people at that press conference would back up what she was saying. Not one of them. She was out there alone on a limb, just lying her butt off.
Well, you say she's lying, and yet we've seen hundreds and thousands of these reports. You're right that the Trump administration is doing its best not to allow any oversight, not to allow us into these secret prisons, not to allow us to see these kids.
Prisons.
No, they are. I mean, even Joaquin Castro went to visit, and he was not allowed to take pictures. He did anyway, because he's a member of Congress. If there's nothing untoward here, if there's nothing going wrong, why don't they allow members of Congress to do unannounced inspections the way we would for any children's home?
Let's look at the motivation of the members of Congress. The ones who are running for president, Joaquin Castro, the squad, et cetera, they're not going down there for oversight. They're going down there.
Congressman Don Byer,
they're going down there to be disruptive. That's their sole intent, is to be disruptive of the families and the children that are being held and processed there. And they shouldn't be allowed to do that. It's very hard on the people that are being held.
So my Congressman Don Byer, the guy I actually ran against in the Democratic primary in 2014, but he is my member of Congress. He's yours as well.
He is.
He's not running for president. He went down there. He was prevented from seeing what he wanted to see. I've heard this from many members of Congress.
Why didn't he ask for an appointment? You know, just ask for an appointment. They accommodate everybody.
It's important to do unannounced. When we inspect a children's home, when we inspect a nursing home, right here in Virginia, the laws actually require unannounced visits. You know what? When you go to a restaurant and you check for food safety, the food inspector doesn't say, all right, I'm coming on Thursday at 3 so you can clean your rats out and scrub, right? Unannounced inspections, particularly when awful things are going on, that's how you determine if it's going on. Do you agree
So-
that Trump should allow unannounced inspections
No.
by members of Congress?
No, because they're there to be disruptive, and they shouldn't be allowed to be in and
Well,
disrupt
you're
the
assuming
people
their
who are
motivation.
there.
Does not Congress have oversight over the executive branch?
They can do their oversight the way it was intended. They do their oversight, but disruptive inspections for the sole purpose of disruption is not something they should be allowed to do.
Okay, you've presumed disruption. The answer is do the inspection. If the member of Congress comes in and starts, I don't know, unlocking doors, that would be disruptive, right? Starts freeing people. But giving a speech where you disagree with conduct of what's going on, that doesn't count as disruptive. That counts as free speech.
No, they
Mike.
disrupt. They disrupt inside. But let's talk about let's talk about the reality of where we are in that today. So in January, the president asked for $5 billion to improve the process
To
at
build
the
a
border.
wall.
No, this was to improve the process at the
Democrats gave him money
the border.
to improve the process at the border. He wanted the money for the wall.
So this was in January. It was not until earlier this month that the Congress finally voted that $5 billion to do it. And again, your hero, Congresswoman AOC and her squad, all voted against $5 billion to improve conditions for the migrants at the border.
You can keep calling her
they
my hero.
voted
I've never
against
said
it.
AOC is my hero. Nancy Pelosi is one of my heroes, not AOC. But the larger question.
Why did it take Nancy 6 months after the president requested the $5 billion to improve the conditions at the border to get the money to the Border Patrol?
Why is the president causing all this misery in the first place? We didn't need to have this misery. The kids, if he had followed what President Obama did.
If you don't have beds, if you don't have facilities,
you let
if you
the
don't have
children
toothpaste,
go in America where they can be taken care of by their family members.
We've been doing that. We've been getting them to their extended family members wherever they can be found.
Mike, there was like 2,000 or 3,000 kids that Kirsten Nielsen, former Secretary of Homeland Security, couldn't even find.
Right, because they had been placed with family members and they didn't have the records to figure out which family members they were with.
No, because the Homeland Security that took them did not even know their names. They didn't even do the basic checkoff that we do.
Right.
People in prison.
Right.
American prisons.
I admit they had lousy records. I admit that.
People in American prisons are treated better than these kids. And I'm sorry to say this, the Taliban and Somali pirates treat their prisoners of war better than we've treated these kids. They allow them to bathe.
Come on.
They allow them toothbrushes. They allow them regular meals instead of this syrupy burrito substance.
They didn't have the money. You need to get the Congress to appropriate the money, and
go.
Nancy Pelosi would not provide the money.
You know, every now and then, Mike, we have, I don't think it happened in Virginia, but I know that there are other states where the federal government requires that the people in prisons have a certain minimum standard. And if you don't fund enough to provide that minimum standard, then you gotta let them go out of prison because that basic humanity
we can't
is required.
let kids just wander through the desert. You just can't do that.
Not through the desert. These are kids. There are hundreds of organizations all across the country, nonprofit organizations, religious organizations
The Trump administration
that would take
wants to
care
place them
of
with
these
families,
kids.
not with organizations if they can do it.
Families, organizations, anything is better
No
than
kids-
putting them in these cages
No
where they're
kid-
brutally
well,
treated.
Okay, you know Obama was the first one to put them in cages.
No.
Yes, he was.
No.
Mark?
No, you're talking about a few that have committed crimes. I'm talking about
No, I'm talking about the
kids.
kids that were separated from their parents and they had to put them someplace and they put them in cages.
The
That
Flores
was what Jay
settlement
Johnson
says you
did.
can't do it more than 20 days.
Right.
And that's been around since 1999,
I understand
think.
that. And they don't do it for more than 20 days, and they didn't do it for more than 20
They're
days
doing it now
after Flores.
They're doing it now for more than 20 days.
I don't think so.
Separating those kids.
Mark, there would be
I'll
a
tell you what,
lawsuit in 10 seconds.
We have a phone call, and I do want to take that call. So, Brian from Fairfax, you've been waiting a long time. What are your thoughts?
Hi. I just have a relevant piece of information. I'm sorry I don't remember all the details, but there's a 13-year-old girl from New York who is in one of these camps. She is an American citizen, but her mother is not. She has a passport to prove it and everything, but she is being held in these camps in order to get to the mother. So I just wanted you all to
I
be aware
don't
of
know that case, Brian. I'll tell you this, that girl should file for habeas corpus. I do know
that girl's in a camp.
Right. Well,
Right, but she has a lawyer.
I hope she has a lawyer.
She has a lawyer, and she should file for habeas corpus yesterday.
But I mean, my concern.
She's 13, so I don't know if she has a lawyer or
Well,
not.
I don't know where the story comes from, Brian. But if you know, I mean, that reporter, someone should let her know she has legal rights. My concern, and that's an interesting and unusual case. That I don't think that's so common. But what I do think is common is these kids. I mean, Mike, people have been coming here to America to escape persecution. You can go back to the Puritans, right? I mean, this is what this country is founded on.
Right.
And we have laws that require us, and maybe you disagree with those laws, that require anyone who steps foot in America and asks for asylum has a right to have those claims adjudicated to see whether someone can get asylum or not. Donald Trump is breaking those laws.
No, he's not. Anybody who claims asylum goes through the process, Mark. There's no one.
One of the things the Democrats have offered is more immigration judges, so people can
Where
go
are
through.
they? Offered. Pelosi controls the House. How about last February?
They've passed lots of bills to have more immigration judges.
I haven't
Donald
seen
Trump
it.
has said he doesn't want them.
No, Trump wants more.
He
immigration
doesn't want
judges.
immigration
No,
judges.
he does want.
No, what he
immigration
wants
judges.
is a wall.
He wants both.
Which will do nothing. And
No,
the other thing he's trying to do is
the best security barrier that you could possibly have.
There's 2,000 miles of border from the Rio Grande to California. And some of it is some natural barriers. But here's the thing about a wall. If you build a 30-foot wall, I can show you a 35-foot ladder. You build a 50-foot wall, I can show you a 60-foot ladder.
Right.
This is not
Mark,
a
why does
small.
Why does a wall work in Israel and it
Because
doesn't work here?
let me tell you why. Because that's a small enough wall that they have it manned pretty much every 100 feet.
And so we're going to.
Are you going to hire enough manpower to man the entire 2,000-mile border?
No.
I don't know how many that requires. 50,000 people?
No, we're not going to hire enough to man the entire 2,000, but we'll hire enough to have people who can respond to anywhere along there once we get increased drone technology that will fly around and spot the people who are coming, approaching the wall. Then when you see the caravans or even individuals who are coming to the wall, that's when you deploy the Border Patrol to that exact area. And the wall slows them down so the Border Control can intercept them at the spot. That's the theory.
I think there's a basic disagreement that we have about who's coming across the border. In Israel, most of the people that were coming across the border were coming across to do nefarious things. There are some that cross the southern border to do nefarious things, but I hope you agree with me that the vast majority are not. They are migrants seeking a better life, escaping persecution, seeking economic advantage, and I think they would go through the front doors if we would allow them the asylum claims that we're supposed to.
No.
We're not doing it. We're allowing like 5 claims a day.
You just said seeking economic advantage. That is specifically against the law in the United States. We do not accept by law economic refugees.
Well, the Irish seemed to escape the potato famine, and they did it in the 1840s.
Right, but the laws have changed since then.
Well,
now, if you want to change the laws, go ahead.
Those are bad laws.
But
we got to take a break.
That's fine.
And we'll be back right after this.
You're not the kind of guy that makes the girls all sigh.
2 for $3.
They never turn their heads and look when you walk by. 'Cause it's the little things.
Oh, thank you.
You're welcome. Helping.
What a nice young man.
Pass it on.
My goodness.
You are not what you got.
A message from the Foundation for a Better Life.
I better get out of here. Ooh.
Maybe you can make retirement happen. After all, you made this vacation happen.
Double points with every purchase?
Cleverly merging promotions.
Love it.
Cross-referencing travel sites. And booking all your flights with those...
Vouchers. I got us bumped.
They were like, oh. But now they're like... Aloha. You aced this vacation. Now get the tips you need to get on track at aceyourretirement.org.
I tried Oxy at a couple of parties. I thought I had it under control. I didn't know it'd be this addictive. I didn't know how far I'd go to get more.
Opioid dependence can happen after just 5 days. Know the truth, spread the truth. what to expect when you're expecting
Like here.
a teenager.
Today, I'm going to show you how to team-proof your home. First step, hide the car keys. Preferably somewhere they would never look. Challenges will come up. Be ready for them. Hi, honey.
Ready for the... Mom, you don't use mannequins in the mannequin challenge.
You don't have to know it all to be a perfect parent. Thousands of teens in foster care will love you just the same.
We're back to the Inside Scoop. Here again, your host.
Welcome back to the Inside Scoop. I'm your host, Mark Levine. Tomorrow, I expect the nation to be transfixed as, actually, sorry, it's Wednesday, day after tomorrow, as Robert Mueller, former special counsel, former FBI director, appointed by Democrats and Republicans, and kind of your stereotypical G-man, not someone I can imagine cracking a smile or having much of a sense of humor. This guy plays it close to the vest. This guy goes by the book. If anything, I would argue, frankly, he's too conservative. Compare him to, say, Kenneth Starr, who found something on Whitewater, couldn't find anything the Clintons did wrong, but decided to discover an extramarital dalliance in the White House. Not this guy, not Bob Mueller. He stuck only to Russian collusion, obstruction of justice. And still in his 448 report, there is a lot of very damaging material that I think most Americans haven't read. Well, he's coming in, he's being subpoenaed, he's going to testify for 5 hours on Wednesday. I think the nation will be transfixed. I hope so. I think they want to know if the president's committed crimes. Republicans are trying to say, it's no big deal, there's nothing to see here. Move along, folks. Mike, I assume that's your view about Wednesday?
No, I'm actually looking forward to Wednesday.
I'm glad to hear that.
Because the time will be equally divided between the two sides, which means you get 2.5 and we get 2.5.
Mm-hmm.
And I have a lot of questions that I want to ask in my 2.5. Now, I expect to fall asleep because I don't expect Mueller to deviate from his report. In fact, when you ask him or when Chairman Nadler asks him A, B, and C, I think he'll sit there, he'll whisper with his aides a little bit, he'll flip through his book, he'll whisper with his aides, and then he'll say, Mr. Chairman, if you'll turn to page 35, let me cite the relevant part there that's going to be the responsive answer to your question. And I expect we'll get 5 hours of that.
Here's the thing. There's a lot in the report that's very interesting.
But we've all read it.
Well, I confess, I have read the executive summary, the introductory summaries of both Volume 1 and Volume 2. Mm-hmm. I haven't read all 448 pages. I mean to. I'll get around to it. And I'm a guy who tends to want to read these things. So you may be surprised that I haven't read it yet. Have you read all 448 pages?
I have had all 448 pages open in front of me. I have read at least several sentences of each page.
All right, you skimmed the whole report.
I have not read the whole thing.
I've read the summary, I've read the outline, and I've read a few pages.
Once it was released, we had a week nonstop of every news outlet in the country just pouring through it, dedicating their whole newscast to it. If you weren't watching news that week, I get where you wouldn't have seen what was there. But anything that was possible, you would have caught on MSNBC, CNN, ABC, CBS. You know,
so let's go through some of the basics here. We have at least 150 contacts between the Trump campaign and the Russian government. That's a lot of contacts.
No, not really.
I don't think you would have found that for Obama or George Bush or Mitt Romney or John McCain or anyone else who's run for president before.
Why?
Why? Well, let me give you some reasons why. One thing, Donald Trump was busy trying to build a hotel. That's also in the report. He wanted to build the Trump Hotel Moscow. He's doing it during his campaign while meanwhile lying to the American people saying he has no connections with Russia when he's trying to make a bundle millions of dollars and probably is running for president to help his business deals. Was that not relevant? Is that not an interesting part of the report?
It's news.
It's news. We also have clearly, and I don't think anyone disputes this, the Russians committing espionage, not only using their troll farms and Facebook and Twitter, but actively cracking into private materials of the Hillary Clinton campaign, going in illegally, stealing that documents, committing espionage, taking it, making it public, telling the Trump campaign, hey, we got these goods for you. And the Trump campaign said, give us more, give us more. We want all this dirt on Hillary. I compare
Except
that.
They never got any.
Of course he did.
No, he didn't.
What was all the WikiLeaks stuff? There's a ton of stuff. There was Podesta's emails. There was...
that wasn't given to the Trump campaign.
It was made public, which the Trump campaign asked them to do. Donald Trump, he did this openly. You can't deny it. Russia, if you're listening, I want you to find out Clinton's emails. And according to Robert Mueller, within 5 hours, they went ahead to try to do just that.
Do you have no sense of humor? I mean, come on. He was joking, clearly. It was.
He wasn't joking.
Hey, Russia, if you can hear me,
all right.
release the emails.
Was Donald Trump Jr. joking when in private they said, we got all this dirt on Hillary, it's straight from Russia to the Russian government, and he said, that's great, bring me more. And then they had this wonderful meeting in the Trump Tower, a couple floors from where his father is. Was Donald Trump Jr. joking in this private meeting that Donald Trump tried to cover up? That's also in the report.
Probably not. I think he really wanted to get more information.
Of course he did.
But as you know, they totally stiffed him, and all they wanted to talk about was the McGinsky Act during that famous meeting.
But it doesn't matter. Look, let's
let's
compare to Richard Nixon. Let's compare to Richard Nixon. To this day, there is no evidence. I mean, historians debate the question of whether or not Richard Nixon colluded with the Watergate burglars. There is still no evidence to this day that he did. It is possible that he did. He ordered them to do that break-in. It's also possible the Watergate burglars did it on their own. Historians don't know that. The reason why an article of impeachment was approved in the House Judiciary Committee against Richard Nixon was because of the cover-up, not because of the actual crime. And what was the actual crime? The Watergate burglars broke and entered to plant a bug. You know what? They weren't successful. As you know, the night watchman found it. The bug was never planted. They didn't get any information. Compare that to Donald Trump, where not only did espionage happen, but they got tons of information. He used it in the campaign, and the Russians were trying to get him elected, and he welcomed it, and I have no doubt that he would not have won, but for Russian help.
Mark, I grew up in New York exactly according to Google Maps, 10 miles from where Donald Trump grew up. I know the area, I know the people, I know the sense of humor, I know the culture. There is no way, when I saw him saying, hello, Russia, if you have them, please release them, there was no way that was anything other than an attempt at humor.
All of Volume 2 of the Mueller report is the cover-up. Again, Richard Nixon was not found guilty of collusion or conspiracy, even though he was an indicted co-conspirator.
And
he was found guilty of
in fact, Trump was found innocent of collusion.
No, he was not found innocent of collusion. Mueller, if you read the report, says, I'm not going to talk about collusion. There's a conspiracy. That's what I'm going to talk about, and evidence conspiracy. The whole second volume lays example after example after example of Donald Trump intentionally obstructing justice, saying, I got to fire this guy, he's on my tail. My presidency is dead if they find out about this. Oh, Donald Trump Jr., let's lie to the press about what happened at that meeting. Example after example after example of cover-ups, I would argue were worse than Richard Nixon's cover-ups. And Richard Nixon, maybe you don't think he should have resigned or have faced impeachment, but if you compare the two cases, Donald Trump's is far worse. At least Nixon didn't work with the Russians to do this. He used Americans to do his dirty work.
Robert Mueller disagrees with you. If there was obstruction, he would have said that there was obstruction.
No. What the report says, Volume 2, you've read it, at least the summary. Here's what the report says. He says, I am not allowed by this old Justice Department regulation that I happen to disagree with, and it's not based in the Constitution or laws, but okay.
And it was not brought forward by the Republican administration. It had been there for 40 years.
No, that's right. It had been there since Nixon, and Clinton used it too. Based on this policy, I cannot legally, according to this policy, accuse Donald Trump of a crime no matter how bad a crime he's done. And I'm going to preserve this evidence so when he's no longer president, we can see about indictments.
I don't think he said that, no.
He did say that. I'm going to show it to you in the report.
Right.
I'll find it in the break. He said, I'm going to preserve evidence so we can see the president can be indicted after he's no longer president. He says that in there. We're going to preserve the evidence. Congress has the right to do impeachment. That's also in his report. But I cannot accuse the president of it. He says, I cannot charge the president with anything. And then he actually goes one step further. Again, I disagree with him. He says, because I cannot charge him with anything, I will not accuse him of anything because that would be unfair since I can't charge him with anything. Now, that particular memo is the reason he didn't charge him, and Bob Barr said it wasn't that way.
Bill Barr.
Bill Barr, sorry. Bob Barr used to be a member of Congress.
From Georgia.
That's right, Bill Barr.
So Bill Barr said he asked Mueller the question directly. He said, is the reason you are not bringing obstruction of justice charges against the president because of the rule that says you cannot bring charges? And Mueller said, no.
Okay. Well, that's going to be question one then, isn't it, when he talks Wednesday, because his report disagrees with Bill Barr. The report, and I'll read from it when we come back briefly, the report specifically says, I cannot charge the president, and that's why I didn't.
Right. Well, I mean, that would simply be part of the report, but that's not the primary reason why he didn't bring any charges. He didn't have any evidence.
No, that's not what he says. He says, I didn't bring them because I wasn't
Mark,
allowed to bring them, and I want to preserve the evidence.
If you have evidence, you cite it. You don't bury it for 7 years in a government vault.
Cite it. If you read the last 200 pages of Volume 2, there's example after example of obstruction. Example after example where Donald Trump says, fire the special counsel. And Don
That's
McGahn
not obstruction.
says, well, you know, some thought the Saturday Night Massacre, when Richard Nixon filed his prosecutors, that wasn't obstruction either?
Look.
You don't think Saturday Night Massacre was obstruction?
No, because you know why? Because it goes on. You fire the FBI director, guess what? The next day, you get a new FBI director. You fire the special counsel, guess what? The next day, you get a new special counsel.
Not if it's your
You
goon.
cannot stop the investigation.
Sure you do.
It goes on. No, you can't.
Donald Trump worked very hard. Again, it's all through Volume 2 of the report. He worked very hard to get rid of Jeff Sessions. Now, I'm no fan of Jeff Sessions, but Jeff Sessions did one honorable thing. He recused himself from the Mueller investigation because he worked for the Trump campaign. Mueller goes on and on how Trump tried to get Sessions to unrecuse himself. He wanted to control the investigation. And he fired Sessions because he wanted to control. He wanted his toady, his man, Bill Barr, to protect him. And Bill has been a very good toady. Bill's been a very good
Barr
toady.
let Mueller finish the whole thing, gave him extra time.
And then lied about it to the American people.
No, nothing that I know of.
Well, why did Bob Mueller have to write him a letter saying, why have you misstated what's in this report? Why don't you put out my executive summaries? Why are you saying the president was exonerated when I very clearly said he wasn't exonerated? I mean, I think another question is going to come up Wednesday. The Democrats are going to ask Robert Mueller about his letter to Bill Barr.
Okay, so I'm going to quote Bill Barr.
Okay.
Because he was very explicit on this. He never attempted to warrant his statement or his written statement as a summary of the entire report. He warranted as merely top-line highlights. And the top-line highlights were no collusion, no obstruction. Those were the top.
That wasn't what the report said.
Top
the report never says no obstruction.
He never said he was summarizing the whole report. And he makes that case.
But that's not in the report. The report doesn't address collusion. It addressed conspiracy, for one thing. And it specifically doesn't say no obstruction. In fact, it says, Mueller specifically says, if I could have exonerated the president from obstruction of justice, I would have. But I couldn't.
Right.
The evidence was too overwhelming. So all I can do.
I don't think he said overwhelming.
He didn't say overwhelming. He just showed it. He showed overwhelming evidence.
Well, I think his evidence was pretty weak.
Well, I'll tell you this.
Because
I'm glad you're looking forward to Wednesday.
Firing the special counsel and firing the FBI director are not obstruction of justice.
What about encouraging people to lie to the FBI? Suborning perjury. Is that an obstruction of justice? When he tells Hope Hicks, lie to the FBI, when he tells his officials, lie about Donald Trump Jr.'s statement, he's trying to get people to lie to the FBI. I think anyone else who does that would be in jail right now, and it's my hope and belief that after he's no longer president, whether impeached or not, Donald Trump, we will lock him up.
Well, I doubt very much that'll happen, but
We'll see.
You've got 6 years to make the case.
Okay, I'm going to read a little bit from the Mueller report, but when we come back, we're going to move to our Commonwealth of Virginia, give our predictions of what's going to happen, and give you some idea of what you can expect right here in Fairfax County. I'm Mark Levine. If you want to call in, there's still a little bit of time to do so. The number will be on your screen. We'll be right back.
Nice going, Spencer. I can't believe we broke Old Man Hennessy's window.
Correction, dude. You broke. I just threw the ball.
This is really bad. What are we gonna do?
We?
Go to the door, ask for the ball back. Are you serious?
It's my ball, Myrtleback.
You're so dead. I'd run away.
Yeah, to Uruguay.
Kiss your life goodbye. Sorry.
Let's go.
See
ya. Remember me and your well.
Nice one. Some friends you are.
Keep smiling, keep shining.
Hi. Tell him it was an accident. And we can fix the window. Come on. I'll come with you.
Loyalty. Pass it on.
You go first.
A message from the Foundation for a Better Life.
One day these rats were playing in the woods. Wanted some matches and that's no good.
listen to smoke before you give it a try. Only you. Don't play with matches. Don't play with fire. Cause there's nothing very funny about rooftop life. Nothing very nice on a homely spine. So if a gorgeous force is what you desire, don't play with matches. Don't play with fire. Yeah.
Only you can prevent wildfires.
Fire.
Awkward. I'm the awkward silence. You try to avoid me, then there I am again.
But an awkward silence can be a great thing.
Like Kelly here is about to demonstrate.
You haven't really been yourself lately. Are you okay?
We're back to the Inside Scoop. Here again, your host.
Welcome back to the Inside Scoop. I'm your host, Mark Levine. In the last 2 minutes, I went fervently to my phone trying to pull up the page of the Mueller report to contradict Mike on whether or not he relied on that old Justice Department memo. I didn't have time, but I'm going to tell you where to find it. It's around page 201 to page 202. It's the beginning of volume 2. You can read it yourself and you'll check. But we're going to move on to something else. Got to move on to our home, to Virginia. As I said, I am a proud delegate. I am working hard to turn the Virginia House of Delegates blue and the Virginia Senate blue, and I think it's going to happen this year, Mike. I'm not being complacent. I'm going to work very hard for it, and I'm not saying it's a sure thing, but I think we have the candidates to make it happen this year. We'll do our predictions at the end. Do you think we will turn either the Senate or the House of Delegates blue?
I think you got at least a 50-50 shot on both.
Wow. I would say we have a 90% shot on the Senate, maybe even 95% on the Senate. And in my body, I would say 60 to 65%.
Okay.
So we're actually not that different, which is interesting. When you put your political analyst hat on, we're a lot closer. So what, in your view, is going to determine this election in Virginia?
Well, the biggest thing is court-imposed redistricting. That's going to have a dramatic effect on many of the races. It's clearly a tremendous advantage to the Democratic side. And just all things being equal with the redistricting makes it, more likely than not that at least one, perhaps even both, as I said, may flip.
I'll tell you what, before we get to the House of Delegates, which is 100 seats in the body in which I sit, the Senate, which is 40 seats, was not affected by the court redistricting order. Not a single district was changed, and yet you're saying it's 50-50.
Well, I think you say the Senate 95% chance.
I do. Let me tell you why.
All right, but let me only say before you say that I think the House is more likely than the Senate, and then we'll talk.
Oh, well, let me tell you why I think the Senate's more likely, and I guess it's based on the individual senators. There are 19 Democrats in the Senate. I don't think a single one is vulnerable. I'm not going to say that about the House incumbents. I will say that about the Senate incumbents. I don't know of a single Democrat that seriously could lose their seat. So that means we only need one out of a hat. We got the lieutenant governor to break ties. I think we'll do better than one. I actually think, and I guess we'll get to our Senate prediction, I think we'll get to 23. I think we'll get 4 seats in the Senate. We might only get 22, but I'm confident we'll get at least 21, which is good for the Democrats because if that happens, it won't matter if we lose lieutenant governor in 2021. We'll still have a majority in the Senate. And I think the reason is the Democrats in the Senate have done a really good job. I don't know of any one of them that's vulnerable. I think their seats are safe, and there are a lot of Republicans that are retired in the Senate. You know this. I think we can win a lot of those seats.
Well, it's early, okay?
It is early.
Well,
it's not
we're
that
talking
early.
July.
3 months, 4 months. The election's only in 3 months.
Yeah, I don't think these things have crystallized yet. You know yourself, Mark. People really look much more at what's happening on the national scene before they focus down on their state or their localities and stuff like that. So I will make the argument based on that it's early and that it's going to be very, very difficult to come up with an accurate prediction at this point. I'll accept your 23 and say
what's your number?
If
20,
it could
19
be,
stay the same.
Anywhere from stay the same to a 1-seat majority.
To Democrats having 21.
And anywhere from 21-19 to 19-21.
Oh, well, I'll say 21 to 23. We might just get 21 and both be right. But
Okay.
it sounds like you're agreeing with me that none of the 19 incumbent Democrats are in danger.
It's too early to tell. we'll see.
I mean, we may have an independent run against Joe Morrissey, and I may even prefer that independent. I don't know. Apparently, he used to work for him, but he's a Democrat too, so I might be better with that.
We all love fighting Joe. He's he's just
that was my biggest surprise on primary night. All right, let's move on to the House of Delegates. I agree, that's tougher, even with the court ruling. The court ruling helps us. I'm not going to deny that. It ended 8 years of illegal racial gerrymandering. It's a very major decision, even by the United States Supreme Court.
Why do we always put racial onto this?
Because that's what the Supreme Court said.
Mark, it has to do with how they vote. And I understand the Supreme Court. Yes, it does.
No, the Supreme Court of the United States.
We didn't pack people into districts
of course you did.
Because of the color of their skin.
Of course
we packed them in because they vote Democrat.
No, Mike, read the United States Supreme Court decision.
And please, you don't put all your faith in the Supreme Court, so I'm not putting all my faith in the Supreme Court.
But the Supreme Court made a very important distinction between the Virginia case and the national case they just ruled on 3 weeks ago.
Which said
the Supreme Court
was
said
totally legal.
Political gerrymandering is, and I disagree with that decision, but it's completely legal. Do what you want. 5-4 decision. Go ahead, states.
I don't think they said it was completely legal. I think they said the court has no jurisdiction to weigh in on it. Like, who are we to weigh in on what the legislative branch is doing? They're a co-equal branch. Right?
They said we can't really judge it. We don't know what's there. We can't rule on it. Again, I disagree with the decision. But the point is, when it came to Maryland, which clearly was politically gerrymandered, Democrats did it, or Wisconsin, clearly Republican gerrymandered, the court said, we're not going to address, or North Carolina, we're not going to address political gerrymandering. Again, I disagree. That was not the case in Virginia. In Virginia, they said it was illegal racial gerrymandering. The word's appropriate, and the reason was because the Republicans said on the record, we're going to put at least 55% blacks in every one of these 11 districts. That's on the record.
Black is, when they're talking about voting, black is synonymous with liberal Democrat. They're interchangeable words, Mark, when it comes to voting.
Well, they also gerrymandered politically in Virginia, and those districts weren't changed. Well, I mean, the political gerrymandering for putting white liberals in Roanoke, Sam Rasool's district, all together, and then there's this wonderful district that goes all the way around Sam's district. It's like a little button. That's political gerrymandering. The Supreme Court didn't touch that. The ones they touched were racially gerrymandered. This, you may not like the word racial. This was a racial gerrymandering
I'm
case.
going to disagree with the Supreme Court, but I accept their decision. Okay. I've accepted the fact that they have court-imposed thing, which is now judicial gerrymandering.
No, it's judicial ungerrymandering.
Well,
let's
take a look at I think it's judicial gerrymandering.
Here's how we know we're gerrymandered in Virginia. In 2017, big Democratic year, the governor wins 25%. 55%. The lieutenant governor wins 55%. The attorney general, 55%. And the Democrats in the House, we get 49 seats after losing one drawn out of a bowl. If it were fairly drawn, we'd get about 54, 55, 56. We get about the same amount we got statewide. So clearly it's gerrymandered. You can't deny that.
All right, well, you remember back 8 years ago, both houses were gerrymandered. The Republicans controlled the House of Delegates, and they did a very good job. The Democrats controlled the Senate. They gerrymandered it as a Senate, as a majority Democrat Senate, and they blew it, didn't they?
They did.
They weren't as good as their job as Republicans were.
Well, there's a long story there. Actually, Democrats had a map. It was thrown back by the governor. McDonnell vetoed it. They tried again. That's all true. Let's get back to the race. Let's get back to the House of Delegates races. We do have some vulnerable Democratic incumbents. I'm going to admit that. I don't think they're that many. I think they're less than 5. They do exist, and I'm going to do my best to protect them. We also have 3 Democratic delegates who are moving on to be senators. I think they're going to very likely become senators, which is great for the Senate. I think it's hard for us. John Bell's going to make it.
John Bell doesn't have a chance in hell.
John Bell, you think Deborah Rodman and Shel Turpin will make it, but not John Bell?
John Bell doesn't have a chance in hell.
Wow. Okay. Well, this will be our big disagreement. I think John Bell's going to win. He's going to win mightily. I think he's a very strong candidate, and I think Loudon has changed. It's not the old Loudon that it used to be.
We'll see. Remember, he's running for Dick Black's seat.
That's right.
Dick Black never.
Danica Roem ran for Bob Marshall's seat. The biggest homophobe beaten by a transgendered woman.
Yeah.
Times are changing in Prince William and Loudoun County.
All right, but Danica has a better chance than
Danica's strong. I'm not worried about Danica at all. She's a very strong candidate. Who are your weakest incumbents? You name them.
My weakest incumbents?
Democrat or Republican.
Okay,
Name them
no,
both. Who do you think is most likely to lose?
I think your women who took the lead on the post-delivery abortion bill. Those are the ones who are
Kathy
going to be.
Tran is safe. Her district is safe.
Let's see once
I'm not worried about Kathy Tran at all.
All right.
Her district is pro-choice.
Mark, this isn't pro-choice. This is abortion post-delivery.
No, it's
that
not.
was disgusting.
No, it's not.
That was something that shocked even pro-choice Democrats.
That was all a made-up thing. It was not an abortion post-delivery.
Should I quote Governor Blackface Northam and and say what he said about setting the infant aside on a tray?
If it's dying.
Set it on a tray, and
if
then
it's dying.
let's have a conversation with the mother and find out what we ought to do under these circumstances.
The question is, do you intentionally torture a dying infant?
Do you think the
I don't
governor-
believe in intentionally torturing a dying infant. I don't think the governor does either. But he was not talking about a healthy child. He's talking about an infant that is dying.
An infant that survived a botched abortion.
No, an infant that has trisomy 13 or some other genetic abnormality. That's not what he said.
Well, that's what he was talking about.
Let's get back to who's in danger.
So
who do you think's in danger?
I want to know, do you think, Governor Northam was the one in blackface or the Klan outfit?
I don't think he was in either one.
Come on, Mark. You called for his resignation.
I did call for his resignation.
Are you taking that back?
Back when I thought he was one of those two.
He was one. He said he was one of those two.
And then the next day he said he wasn't.
Oh, on second thought, maybe, since you really can't see my face, I can get away with lying my way out of this?
I have condemned what he did here, Mike. I have publicly condemned what he did. I think he had a lot of bad advice. I really do.
I think he's the one in the Klan outfit.
I don't
and I'll
think
tell
so.
you why.
The Klan outfit is actually pretty short.
The Klan outfit,
and Ralph Northam's a tall man.
The Klan outfit.
The other guy would have to be 6'6" for that to be.
The Klan outfit is more offensive than the blackface.
I don't think
so. I think if
one.
he could have gotten away with saying he was the blackface guy, he would have. But he was the Klan guy.
I don't think he was either one. Let's get back to predictions.
All right.
The governor's not on the ballot. The lieutenant governor's not on the ballot. I know Republicans want to talk about them all the time.
Well, no.
The only people on the ballot are the 140 of us serving in the General Assembly.
Is it true the Democratic Party of Virginia will not allow the lieutenant governor to attend fundraising events?
The party and the governor can do what they want to do.
Yeah. I
put it this
so
way.
Lieutenant Governor Justin Fairfax wanted to buy a table at the Democratic dinner, and they said no?
I will not invite him to one of my political events. How about that?
Will you invite the governor?
I'll think about it.
Will you invite Attorney Blackface General Herring?
I will invite Attorney General Herring. Don't think
he's
Attorney General
blackface.
Herring. What he did is very different from what the governor's accused of doing. Can we get to our predictions?
They were both in school at the same time.
They're not on the ballot. You can't make this big argument about people who aren't on the ballot. There's 140 people on the ballot. They're going to go for Virginia values. I predict at the end of the day we will get 54 or 55 delegate seats.
It could go that high. I think if you take it, I think the House, as I said, more likely than the Senate. Senate, I can see it being even, or I can see the Republicans holding, or I can see a one-seat advantage.
So you think we have more chance of doing the House than the Senate?
I think in the House, depending on if we can flip some, I think, I'm not going to go for 55. I'm going to go maybe as high as 52 or 53.
I would be thrilled with that, because then I can become chair maybe of the Militia, Police, and Public Safety Committee and actually do something about gun violence in Virginia. We'll see what happens.
Mark, a lot of fun. Thank you for having me back.
Thank you for coming and debating. That's it for the Inside Scoop. I hope you enjoyed the show. Thank you to everyone here on Channel 10.